What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. Joining me, Chris Fedor. And Chris, I'm coming to you and talking to you and everybody that were around after the Guardians game, right? Don't want to get into it a lot, but energy is high, life is high. As a lifelong Clevelander, just briefly, what is going through your mind?
What a crazy moment for the Guardians. I mean, that's who they are. I think Stephen Vogt said it after the game. Like, that's who we are. That's who we've been all season long. And for the Guardians to win a game, Ethan, where the Yankees got to Class A. They got to him. Judge, Stanton, 2-run lead, down to the final out. But for the Guardians to still win a game, despite the fact that Class A gave it up, it's incredible to think about that they were able to overcome that. You know, a lesser team, a team that's probably not advancing as far as the Guardians to this point, allows that kind of moment to really derail the remainder of their season. And the Guardians said, all right, you've been great for us all season long. You've been the best reliever in all of baseball all season long. We're going to pick you up. And they did, with two very, very unlikely heroes stepping up when it mattered the most.
Oh my goodness, right? Like, you are baseball people at heart, right? Donovan Mitchell even talked about it. He said that basketball is what is paying the bills, getting them by. He will always have love for basketball, but it will never surpass baseball. I'm the same way. I don't know if Darius Garland's the same way. We haven't had that conversation as of yet, but I will have to ask him the next time I see him. But Chris, this is the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. I'm just a little bit excited. Like I said, energy is very high. So we're going to turn it over to the fans and what they had to say, our subscribers, on Subtext, where you can send us questions on a weekly occurrence to get us to talk to you guys, answer your questions, and even talk about your concerns for the Cleveland Cavaliers this year. And it's another episode of Hey Chris. So I'm with my guy Chris right now, and we are going to get into it. So, first question from Scott in Greensboro, North Carolina. Chris, he says, who's going to have the breakout year for the Cavs? And, of course, this is in here. Can the Guardians realistically beat the Yankees?
I mean, I think it's more possible now, obviously. If they would have been down 3-0 in a series and have to win 4 straight against the Yankees with no margin for error, I would have said no, not at all. But if you look at tomorrow's pitching matchup, Luis Gil against Gavin Williams, can Gavin just give the Guardians one time through the order and then turn it over to the bullpen and see if they can do what they've done basically all season long? Can Gavin go 1.5 times through the order and extend it a little bit longer and then turn it over to the bullpen? Like, Luis Gil was really good for the Yankees, but he can also be really, really bad, and he can be hittable, and he can be wild, and he can have command issues and stuff like that. So, I mean, if it becomes 2-2, you got a shot, right? I still think the Yankees are the better, more complete team. But when you have a bullpen like the Guardians do, and you can shorten games the way that they can, and look, some of their guys out of the bullpen haven't been as good in the postseason, and that's typically what happens. These teams are going to see these relievers more frequently, and they're going to have a better idea of what's coming, what they can do, what they can't do, and all that kind of stuff. But look, if you put pressure on the Yankees by getting the game in the hands of the Guardians bullpen, that's a different feeling. And I think that opportunity still exists in this series. I know that the Yankees are going to have Cole coming at some point. Rodon's going to be coming again at some point. But if they can build off of what they did late in this game and get to Gil early in game 4 and just have Gavin be good enough, he doesn't have to be great, but just good enough to get the ball in the hands of the bullpen and see if they can come through in a way that, it didn't seem like they were going to tonight, then I definitely think they have a chance. I'd still pick the Yankees. I think the odds would favor the Yankees, but the one thing that I've learned, Ethan, is you cannot count out this Guardians team, just how scrappy they are, how gutsy they are. So I'm not going to count them out. That would be foolish to do that. What was the Cavs question? I completely forget the Cavs.
What was the Cavs question? I love it. First of all, before we move back over to the Cavs entirely, because I know we got YouTube listeners and even on the podcast itself that are going to be very angry that they don't have anything to go off of when it comes to the Cavs thus far, about 6 minutes in. But Noel and Fry combined salary for 2024, $1,481,000. Those are the two guys that hit home runs for the Guardians to win the game, all those different things. Also, Noel is a rookie. The first rookie to do what he did, right? And I can go into that stat a lot more, but that's for a different time, right? Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, the guys who we know as the Bronx Bombers, the big giants for the Yankees, their combined salary for 2024, $72 million. So, turning this back over to the Cavs, right? We talk a lot about how you get more bang for your buck when it comes to some players and how the Cavs are continuously trying to build up smaller market players into the roles of some of the bigger guys, especially going into this next season. But, Chris, the next question from our guy, Scott in Greensboro, said, who is going to have the biggest breakout year? And for me, it's between two players, right? And I don't even know if the second one is considered a breakout, but Evan Mobley, right? If Evan Mobley can have a breakout year, that would be something that's new. Darius Garland, not so much a breakout year, but more of I'm going to get back to the all-star caliber that I once was at.
Yeah, to me, it's Evan. Like, if you're somebody that is invested in the NBA in some capacity, buy stock in Evan Mobley. That would be my advice, because we're already at a point, Ethan, where he's averaged 16, 9, and 3 while being a top 5 impactful defender in the NBA. So now if you think about the potential opportunities that he's going to get offensively, the touches that are going to increase, the usage that's going to increase, the way that he's going to get the ball, the opportunities that he's going to get throughout a 48-minute game of being the lone big on the floor apart from Jared Allen. It's just there's so much invested in Evan from this organization, and there's such a commitment from this new coaching staff to unlock Evan Mobley. And if we've already seen him do the things that he's done throughout the course of his career while being third, fourth, fifth at times in touches and shot attempts, and you just start picturing what it can look like with more touches, with more involvement, with a higher usage rate, yeah, I think Evan is definitely the most likely candidate to break out for this team. And all he has to do is improve on the offensive end of the floor for him to get in that conversation of all-star, of top 40-ish player in the NBA. Because, like I said, defensively, he's been an impact player since the minute that he came into the NBA. He's one of the 5 most impactful defenders. And we're talking about Wembanyama. We're talking about Rudy Gobert. We're talking about Bam Adebayo. Like, he's in that conversation already at such a young age. So the growth, the evolution for him really just has to come offensively. And if you think about him taking a step forward offensively while being the same defensive force that he's been every single time he has stepped on the floor in a Cavs uniform, you start thinking about the kind of company that he's going to be in, and it gets you really, really excited if you're the Cavs about what the future could look like, not just for Evan, but what the future could look like for this franchise and the runway that exists for them to be set up for sustainable success.
I want to give a quick follow-up because one of our subscribers and subtexters has a comparison. And again, with Scottie Barnes and Evan Mobley. As of right now, who do you think the Cavs would rather have on their roster? And by the end of the season, do you think that changes?
I don't think the Cavs have any regrets when it comes to taking Evan third overall in a year that Scotty went fourth. The Cavs like Scotty Barnes. They looked at him. He had a Team USA pipeline to Kobe Altman. They did a ton of homework on Scotty. And if Evan Mobley wasn't in that draft, then they probably would have taken Scotty Barnes third overall. And this is nothing against Scotty. I think he is a really, really exciting player. I think he does so many different things that are valuable on the floor. And he plays arguably the most important and most difficult position in the NBA to find. But I think the thing that makes the Cavs so unique is multiple 7-footers with length, with rim protection, with athleticism. And the Cavs, if they replaced Evan Mobley with Scotty Barnes, they're not the defensive force that they've been the last 3 years. They're probably a good defensive team with Jared Allen anchoring and some of the other components that they have, but they don't have like a clear-cut identity that they can lean on and a pathway to winning games consistently. You know, Evan Mobley and Jared Allen together and what that means for the Cavs as a defensive team, that is their calling card. That is their foundation. That is their identity. If you replace Evan with Scotty Barnes, it's a different conversation. So it's nothing against Scotty. Like if I took the second pick, I'd be happy, you know? But I don't think the Cavs are losing sleep over the fact that they don't have Scotty Barnes. I think they love Evan Mobley. I think there's a belief inside this organization that Evan is one day going to be in the MVP conversation, and he's one day going to be in a conversation that changes whether or not there's actual belief that not just can the Cavs compete in the Eastern Conference, but can they actually win a championship again?
Right. And I mean, because the ceiling for Evan Mobley when it comes to the defensive end of the game, right? Like, he could become or be in the conversations of best defensive player of all time, depending on how his career pans out. Like,
Right.
and that's the trajectory that he's on. You come into the league, and in your second season, you're in Defensive Player of the Year conversations. Like, that doesn't happen. Unfortunately for him, there's a guy also in the running named Victor Wembanyama, who's kind of blocking the way for Evan Mobley. And like we saw in the Detroit Pistons game, again, small sample size, preseason, not taking a lot into an account, but 4 blocks. Like, the defensive presence. You saw guys literally driving into the lane and saying, one-on-one Evan Mobley versus me, I think I'm going to either back this out or kick it back out because I don't want that smoke. But the next question kind of goes into that small sample size that I was talking about from Greg in Oberlin, Ohio. He says, Kenny's new offense, what happens if your shooters go cold? That became obvious last night against Detroit. So, Chris, obviously for me, I'm of the mind of the Cavs have so many shooting options that they could switch and map out, especially at the guard position. I think the hardest one would be at the small forward position, depending on what you want to run. Like if Max Strus is cold, are you saying that you're going to go with Isaac Okoro as a small forward and that you're going to get more of a shooting opportunity or whatever? For me, it's like if Darius Garland is having an off night, you perceive and see what Donovan's doing. Then it goes down the line, right? Sam Merrill, Ty Jerome, all these other guys that can play the one or the two and fill in for the shooting aspect of that position, not discussing the passing, the point guard, the other possibilities and necessities to do what Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell do.
I think even the beauty of Kenny Atkinson's offensive system, at least theoretically, is that there are multiple pathways to success. And it doesn't have to be the same thing over and over again. And it doesn't have to be leaning into one thing primarily. This offense should, when they get all the components right, when they get comfortable with each other, when they build the chemistry that's required. This offense should be more dynamic, it should be more creative, and it should be more diverse. And I think there's enough different outlets that they can go to offensively. So if the shooting isn't there, then they find a way to get the ball inside. Jaron Allen, Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell going downhill, Darius Garland going downhill, Karis LeVert going downhill. If the shooting isn't there, then they try and run some stuff where, Max Strus is more of a decoy. Sam Merrill is more of a decoy, and they just draw attention. Or you run a two-man game with Max Strus and Evan Mobley, or a two-man game with Max Strus and Jared Allen. I just think there are different options within this offense that is going to make it more difficult for opposing defenses. They have the pick and roll, and they're going to be an elite pick and roll team because they've got elite pick and roll players. Darius, Donovan, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley has the ability as well. They can run some DHO stuff. They can run double drag. They can do a bunch of different things throughout the course of a game, throughout the course of a season, that is going to make it more difficult for an opponent. I wouldn't be surprised if they dabble with the idea of Donovan Mitchell in the dunker spot as opposed to, with the ball in his hands out on the perimeter, because if Donovan Mitchell is going to be guarded by a small and he's in the dunker spot, then the last line of defense for that particular opponent is a small guy. And then Evan Mobley just has to finish over him, or Darius Garland has to finish over him. It's just kind of different. So there are different things I know that this coaching staff is already thinking about, exploring. They might even experiment with it. They're going to run split stuff that Golden State ran with Draymond Green and Klay Thompson and Andre Iguodala and Steph Curry. So I just think the different tentacles that they have throughout the course of a game and throughout the course of the season will be different than what it has been in the past. And I think it'll be less likely for this particular team to get bogged down offensively and turn it into an ugly offensive game. That's in theory, right? That means everything has to come together the right way. But they're not just going to be a team that's over-reliant on threes or over-reliant on transition baskets or over-reliant on pick and roll or over-reliant on points in the paint. I just think it's going to be a varied offensive attack.
Yeah, and I mean, my biggest curiosity this coming season is how much is Jared Allen, Donovan Mitchell, and Darius Garland going to run the Gortat screen? Because if there is a speed matchup, if there is a size matchup, if there's a strength matchup, especially for Jared Allen, just blocking off the lane and letting Donovan and Darius go to work, especially if the shooting isn't going well, that is a prime option for Jared Allen to use the Gortat screen and help his point guard, shooting guard out, whatever the position is. But for me, I think that kind of gets into the next question that we had from Matt in Los Angeles. So I'm not going to go too far into it. He just asked a little bit about the new wrinkles and flow of the Atkinson offense and what do you hope the top speed is, or what they are able to do when they are at top form. For me, it's what Kenny Atkinson talked about at length, right? Being able to play at that 3 speed, right? When he described it as Autobahn. You go as fast as you can. You run it up and down, going up and down, going up, down, whatever. And that could work. Transition offense is a great thing. We've already seen that they're going to be able to get open shots in transition if they're pushing the ball up with their passing rather than bringing it up each person, right? Then the second is when you're in the neighborhood, and you got to figure out where everybody's at, and you got to set up an offense in the half court, and yada, yada, yada. But it's not going too fast, but going at your own speed, right? And then the third one is when you got to do the parallel parking. It could be fourth quarter, late in the game, and you got to set up an offense, but you also got to wait for the clock to tick down a little bit more than you would originally have thought for this Cavs team that's been talking about pace, space, and getting out in transition so much in the early going. I just think that if they, and Kenny Atkinson said it, it is hard for a team to beat you if you are able to play at those 3 speeds. Because most teams, Pacers, especially, want to speed you up, play at their pace. And then there's some teams that want to slow you down. But if you can play at all three speeds and play at your pace throughout the game rather than adhering to what the other team is doing, that'll change the structure of what the Cavs are able to do.
I also think it's important, and I think based on the roster makeup, I think it's important that they play big and small. That they just don't go with one look repeatedly, because different matchups are going to call for different things, and different opponents are going to call for different things, and different games and the way that the flow of the game is going to call for different things. So I like the fact, Ethan, from a Cavs perspective, that they are working with the big lineup that they're committed to. And I like the fact that they're willing to try the spread lineup, and the fact that they do have, Evan Mobley, who is capable of playing the 4 and the 5. That's advantageous for them. He can be the anchor. He can be the centerpiece of that spread lineup. And who knows how good that's going to be. There could be a situation where that becomes their best 5-man lineup in terms of net rating. And deploying Evan Mobley as a center, a high usage center, a focal point offensively center against a backup center, Cavs will take their chances, right? Deploying him as essentially like a second unit stabilizer and anchor, Cavs will take their chances, right? So that gives them a little bit of versatility when it comes to their lineups and their combinations and stuff like that. It allows them, even though like it's a smaller lineup with more shooting, like Evan is still in the middle of that. So how small is it really? If you have like a mobile, athletic 7-footer that can play inside and outside, that also happens to be one of the most impactful defenders in the league, right? It's not the typical small lineup. It's not a 6'7" guy playing center or something along those lines. You know what I mean? So even if they do downsize a little bit, it's not sacrificing all that much size. So I do think they have the ability, based on how this team is constructed, to play big and small, and to not just play big and small, but to be effective playing both of those kinds of looks.
One of the last questions from tonight, Chris, comes from our guy Daniel in Seattle. He says, "Hey, Chris, please assess the likelihood of JT Thor being a contributor and the possibility of him earning a standard contract. I've been impressed with his preseason and Olympics performance." I think for me, JT Thor is an interesting conversation, right? Because he's been in the league for a little bit, has some experience, not all the best. Obviously, he was with the Charlotte Hornets, so we know what they've had going on for the last couple of years. But talking about not a backup center, but like backup power forward, somebody that might be able to take the role of Tristan Thompson if they don't want to give him another contract after this season. JT is just as tall, and when we talk about wingspan, he is long.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is someone that we've seen block shots, be able to disrupt offenses, just because of his length and his size and whatever he's been able to do on the interior of the paint. It's not to the same level of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, obviously, but he has been productive on that end of the floor, as much as he struggled on the offensive end at times.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to put any kind of player in a box, especially in today's NBA when it's so positionless. There's so much versatility involved. But it just feels like, to me, JT Thor is more of like a 4/3 than he is a 4/5. And because of that, like, there isn't a clear-cut way to get him consistent minutes on this team when at full strength. Now, look, injuries happen all the time. Situations could arise throughout the course of a season. So if things happen, if there are circumstances that come up throughout the course of the year, okay, then maybe there is a little bit more of an opportunity for somebody like JT. But if you look at it right now, the 3/4 spot is pretty crowded. And you can sit there and you can say, well, not all these guys are all that talented, and he should be able to replace some of them because of the weaknesses that they have. George Niang comes to mind. There are people that get down on Isaac Okoro because of his, still developing offensive game where he's completely ignored by opponents. But you got Max, you've got Evan, you've got Isaac, you've got Dean, you've got George, you've got Jalen Tyson, who's battling for minutes in those same spots. Karis LeVert is going to get minutes at the 3, not just only at the 2. So it's just, this isn't the team where I think JT Thor is going to be able to make an impact for the NBA roster, and get opportunities with the NBA roster. I think the Cavs brought him on because they saw what he did, obviously, in the Olympics. They've had their eye on him for a while, and the idea of him is excited. He's bouncy, he's athletic, he's long, he can shoot from the outside a little bit. So he provides some of that perimeter game and some of that versatility. But he's going to spend the majority of his time this year with the Cleveland Charge because there just aren't opportunities for somebody like him, for a team that has championship aspirations and is coming off an Eastern Conference semifinals appearance.
Yeah, and I feel like we've been a broken record with that. Not in a bad way, but like this is a team where if you don't have a solidified role already, if you are not a part of the 10-11 rotation, which is already stretching it a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it is going to be hard for you to fight for minutes unless things like last year happen, injuries, illnesses, whatever. Like those are the reasons that we saw so many different players last season get a chance, an opportunity, because there was so much going on internally for the Cavs and they had to figure things out, right? Going back to the two-way players from last year, they didn't really see a whole lot of game time either, unless it was in garbage time or trying to figure out like where we are in the rotation or resting guys or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a situation where those players were getting adequate minutes or in like valid games, like trying to figure out where they're going to fit into a rotation. It was like, we need you to fill in. Don't think that this is going to be a forever thing. But
yeah, I mean, that's why the NBA implemented two-way contracts, Ethan, in case chaos happens throughout your roster, you have other guys that you feel can give you NBA minutes. But at the same time, because they're probably not going to get those consistent minutes when the team is at full strength, there's an opportunity for them to go a different route and develop, and get playing time and get opportunities and work on their game. And that's the G League. So, that's the kind of player that JT Thor is. He is not somebody who has solidified a role in the NBA. He's not somebody who has gone to the NBA and performed well consistently enough to stay in a rotation or to stay full time on an NBA roster. He's somebody who's going to have to earn it. He's going to have to go down to the G League with the Cleveland Charge, and he's going to have to be a great player for the Charge. He's going to have to put up big numbers. He's going to have to impact winning in a positive way. And he's going to have to show that I deserve a bigger opportunity. But to this point, from an NBA standpoint, he hasn't shown that. So, he takes a different pathway. And if the Cavs get something from him, down the road or even this year, then great. That's a luxury. That's the situation that they're in. They don't need JT Thor. They don't need Jalen Tyson. They don't need Craig Porter Jr. They don't need Luke Travers, not from the outset anyway. And it allows those guys to work on their game and develop behind the scenes, and not in a situation where, winning and losing is really, really important on a nightly basis.
Proving that you don't belong in the G League is what I've been saying, right? Showing that you are too good.
Yeah, I'm too good for the G League.
I'm too good to be there, right? That's a conversation that needs to be had about the contributions that you're having there, right? And the Chargers are supposed to be good this year. Like it's not like they're sending you down to like some second-rate organization. Like, this is still the Cavs organization. Like, this is still the team. They're going to be monitoring you heavily. They're going to be wanting you to do well. Like, this is a team that are trying to be developmental. We talked about it at the beginning of the podcast, right? If there are guys that are playing well and are playing to the point where they show themselves to be NBA caliber players, nightly NBA caliber players, then they'll have deeper conversations about players that are coming off of contracts that could be up for trade deadline conversations and say, well, can you fill this role if this person wasn't here? And that's a conversation that we're going to have. And I'm not going to get into it now because I know our guy Anu from San Francisco said that he wants to hear our storylines heading into the season. That is going to be a separate podcast itself. So you're going to have to wait for that one. But that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy on Subtext. That is where you can find us. That is where you can have your voice heard. All these different good things. This is a platform that you can sign up for. 14-day free trial. Or you can go to cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.